The room went quiet the moment she walked in, not the polite, admiring kind of quiet, but the sharp, uncomfortable kind that happens when someone decides, in the space of a single glance, that you don't belong. Cecile Obi had walked into rooms like this her entire life. Ballrooms with crystal chandeliers. Boardrooms with mahogany tables that cost more than her first apartment. Conference halls in Geneva and Singapore and New York, where the air itself seemed to cost something. She had learned, a long time ago, to walk through those rooms like she owned them, not with arrogance, but with the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly what she had built, and exactly what it had cost her. Tonight was the Meridian Gala, the most prestigious annual fundraiser in Toronto's business community. The event was held every year at the Fairmont Royal York, in the grand ballroom on the second floor, and it raised money for children's healthcare research across the province. Corporations bought tables at $50,000 each. Individuals bid on auction items that started at $20. The dress code was black tie, the food was French, and the guest list read like a directory of the city's financial elite. Cecile was there because she had donated $250,000 that year. She was there because her company, Veralink Technologies, had just closed a deal that restructured the digital infrastructure of 3 major Ontario hospitals, cutting their administrative costs by 31% and redirecting those savings directly into patient care. She was there because the Meridian Foundation's board chair had personally called her office and asked her to attend, telling her assistant that they were planning to announce the donation publicly and that her presence would mean a great deal. She arrived at 7:15, alone. She had sent her assistant home early because the day had been long and she didn't like making people wait. She wore a deep blue gown, floor-length, with a structured neckline and a single gold bracelet on her left wrist. She carried a small clutch. Her hair was natural, pulled back softly at the sides. The woman who stopped her was standing near the entrance to the main hall, beside a tall flower arrangement of white orchids and eucalyptus. She was wearing a champagne-colored gown that had clearly been expensive once, and a set of pearl earrings that caught the light when she turned. Her name was Beverly Harcastle, and she was the wife of Gordon Harcastle, whose family had founded Harcastle Capital Management 3 generations ago, and who remained, in certain circles, the kind of name that people said with a particular inflection, part respect, part envy, part something else. Beverly Harcastle looked at Cecile the way some people look at a door that is opened in the wrong direction. Not angry, exactly confused. And then, almost immediately, certain. "Excuse me," she said. Cecile slowed. She looked at the woman. "I think you may have the wrong floor," Beverly said. "The staff entrance is on King Street. You'll want to go around to the east side of the building." The string quartet in the corner was playing something slow and elegant, and for a moment the music seemed to fill the space between them. Cecile didn't move. She looked at Beverly Harcastle, at the pearls, at the champagne gown, at the particular expression of a woman who had made a decision and was waiting for the world to confirm it. "I'm a guest," Cecile said. Her voice was even. She had spent 20 years making her voice even. Beverly blinked. "I'm sorry. I'm a guest at this event. My name is Cecile Obi." Something shifted in the other woman's face. Not recognition, not yet, but a kind of recalibration, the way a person looks when they realize they may have made a small error of navigation but haven't fully accepted it yet. "I'm sure there's been some confusion," Beverly said. "The catering staff we're supposed to use. I'm not catering staff." Cecile held the woman's gaze. "I'm a donor. I've been seated at Table 1. Table 1 was reserved for the Foundation's top donors of the year. It was the table closest to the stage, set with gold-rimmed china and printed placards. Beverly Harcastle knew exactly what Table 1 meant. Her husband's family had sat there every year for the past decade. "Well," Beverly said, and there was a note in her voice now. Not quite an apology, not quite a concession. "I'm sure it will all be sorted out at the registration desk." She turned away. It was a deliberate turn, the kind that ends conversations. Cecile stood where she was for a moment. She had been here before too. Not in this exact ballroom. Not in this exact gown, but in this exact moment. The moment where someone looks at your face and your skin and the way you carry yourself and decides, before you have spoken a single word, that you are in the wrong place. She had been 9 years old the first time it happened, in a department store in Hamilton, when a security guard followed her and her mother through the children's clothing section for 7 minutes without speaking. She had been 23 when it happened in a venture capital office in Waterloo, when the receptionist asked her twice if she had an appointment even after she had shown the confirmation email. She had been 38 when it happened at a hotel bar in Calgary, when the bartender served the man who sat down after her first. She was 44 now, and she was worth $960 million, and it was still happening. She walked to the registration desk, gave her name, collected her table card, and went into the ballroom. Gordon Harcastle noticed her at 9:30, which was not the beginning of the evening, but was the beginning of the part of the evening that would matter. He was at the bar with 2 other men, Philip Drummond, whose family ran a real estate development company with projects across the GTA, and Conrad Weybridge, a retired investment banker who spent most of his time now on charity boards and golf courses. They were discussing, in the vague and comfortable way of men who have already said everything important that they plan to say, the current state of the federal government's infrastructure spending commitments. The name came up because Philip mentioned it. "Have you spoken to Obi yet?" Philip said. He was looking across the room, and Gordon followed his gaze. "Obi?" Gordon said. "Cecile Obi, Verolink." Philip lifted his glass. "She's the one at table 1. She's been the talk of the room all evening. I'm surprised you haven't met her." Gordon looked. He saw a woman in a dark blue gown, seated beside the foundation's board chair, apparently deep in conversation with someone Gordon didn't recognize. She was laughing at something. She had a good laugh, open, unguarded, the kind you couldn't manufacture. "What's Verolink?" Conrad said. "Healthcare infrastructure software," Philip said. "They did the rollout for Sunnybrook and St. Mike's and 3 hospitals out west. She built it from nothing, started the company in 2007 out of a 2-bedroom apartment in Scarborough. She took it public 4 years ago." He paused. "She's closing a deal with the Federal Procurement Office. Nationwide hospital network integration. They're saying it's valued at $400 million. Gordon set his glass down. $400 million. Give or take. Philip glanced at him. "We've been trying to get in front of her for 3 months. Her calendar is impossible." Gordon was quiet for a moment. Harcastle Capital had been navigating a difficult period. The public framing was careful. Restructuring, strategic pivot, portfolio realignment. But the private reality was that the firm had overextended in commercial real estate during a period when commercial real estate had stopped performing, and the resulting debt load had required a sequence of uncomfortable conversations with their lending partners that Gordon had been trying, with limited success, to resolve before they became public knowledge. What Harcastle Capital needed was a significant new revenue relationship, something that would signal momentum, something that would give their institutional investors a reason to stay patient. A partnership with Verolink, structured correctly, could be exactly that. "She's here tonight," Gordon said. "She is. Then I'll go and introduce myself." He had gone 3 steps across the ballroom when he saw Beverly. His wife was coming from the direction of the cloakroom, and she had the expression she got when something had not gone the way she expected. Gordon knew that expression well. It was the expression of a woman who was in the process of deciding how to position something. "What's wrong?" he said. "Nothing's wrong," Beverly said. "I simply had a misunderstanding with one of the guests earlier, a woman near the entrance. I may have." She stopped. "I thought she was part of the catering team." Gordon looked at her. She was wearing quite plain, Bev. His voice was quiet. "Who was it?" Beverly's eyes moved across the room. They landed on the woman in the dark blue gown at table 1, and Gordon watched his wife's face do something he had seen it do before, something he had told himself he hadn't seen, something he was going to have to stop telling himself. "Oh," Beverly said. "Yes," Gordon said. "I didn't know who she was. I know you didn't." If I had known, Beverly. He said her name the way he said it when he needed her to hear it. It shouldn't matter who she is. But even as he said it, he was already calculating, already planning the approach, already thinking about what he would say and how he would frame it, and whether an apology delivered immediately, before the situation had time to settle into anything fixed, might be enough to salvage what the evening still held. He crossed the ballroom alone. Cecile had known the name Harcastle Capital for 20 years. She had known it the way you know the names of institutions that shape the landscape of the place you're trying to build something in. Not personally, not warmly, but with a professional clarity that carries its own kind of weight. When she was 26 and trying to get her first round of seed funding for the initial version of what would eventually become Veralink, she had sent a proposal to Harcastle Capital's venture arm along with 11 other firms. Harcastle had been the only one that didn't respond, not even to decline. She had thought about that sometimes, over the years. Not with bitterness, exactly. More like a kind of quiet notation. A data point that she filed alongside other data points in the part of her mind that tracked the shape of things. When Gordon Harcastle stopped at her table and introduced himself, she recognized his name immediately. She also recognized the particular quality of his smile. The kind that a person deploys when they are managing something. "Miss Obi," he said. "I've been hoping to get an opportunity to speak with you this evening. Your work with the hospital network has been genuinely extraordinary. The outcomes at Sunnybrook alone." "Thank you," she said. She didn't stand. She kept her voice pleasant. "I wanted to say, as well." He paused, adjusted. "My wife mentioned that she may have spoken to you earlier, near the entrance, and I understand there was a misunderstanding. I hope it didn't cause any." "It was fine," Cecile said. Gordon looked at her. He wasn't sure whether she meant it, or whether she was being precise in a way that didn't invite further discussion, and that uncertainty made him careful. "I'd love to set up a meeting," he said. "We've been following Veralink's growth for some time, and I think there may be real alignment between what you're building and where we're positioned to." "My assistant handles my calendar," Cecile said. She reached into her clutch, and for a moment Gordon thought she was going to give him a card. Instead, she found what she was looking for, which turned out to be a small tin of lip balm, which she opened and used and replaced in her clutch with perfect composure. "Of course," Gordon said. "I appreciate you introducing yourself." It was a dismissal, and they both knew it, and there was nothing Gordon could do about it in a room full of people without making things considerably worse. He went back to the bar. Philip Drummond looked at him. "How did it go?" "She's considering her calendar," Gordon said. He ordered another drink. Beverly found her in the hallway outside the ballroom, near the elevator bank, at 10:15. Cecile was on the phone, speaking quietly. Beverly waited until she had finished, which took 4 minutes, and then she stepped forward. Ms. Obi," she said. "I'm Beverly Harcastle." Cecile looked at her. "I wanted to apologize," Beverly said. "For earlier, I made an assumption I was wrong. I'm sorry." The apology was clean. Beverly had rehearsed it, and it showed, and the fact that it showed was the problem. Because what Cecile heard in it was not remorse about what had happened, but regret about the circumstances under which it had happened. Which was a different thing. A meaningfully different thing. And Cecile had spent 44 years learning to hear the difference. "I appreciate that," Cecile said. "I didn't know who you were," Beverly said. And there it was, the qualifier that undid everything that had come before it. The sentence that said, without saying it, "If I had known, I would have behaved differently," which means the problem wasn't what I did, but what I didn't know, which means the problem was yours to avoid and not mine to own. Cecile looked at Beverly Harcastle for a long moment. At the pearls, at the champagne gown, at the woman who would have treated her exactly the same way if her net worth had been $960 instead of $960 million, and who had not thought, even now, about that fact. "I know," Cecile said. She pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. She stepped inside. She called her chief of staff from the car on the way home. His name was Wendell, and he had been with her for 11 years. and he knew from the particular quality of her voice when she said his name that something had happened. "The Harcastle capital meeting request," she said. "They've sent 3 follow-up emails in the past month," Wendell said. "Philip Drummond reached out again yesterday through the foundation channel. Remove them from the pipeline," she said. Wendell was quiet for a moment. Permanently? Permanently. He didn't ask why. He had learned, over 11 years, that when Cecile said something in that tone, the reasoning was already complete. She didn't arrive at decisions in the moment. She observed, she processed, she filed things in the part of her mind that tracked the shape of things, and then at some point the filing was done and the decision was made, and it was simply a matter of executing it. "Done," he said. She looked out the window at the city. The lake was somewhere beyond the lights, dark and constant, doing what it had always done. The announcement came 2 weeks later. It was a Tuesday morning, and the news broke across the financial press the way significant news tends to break. Quietly at first, in a wire service bulletin that most people scrolled past, and then all at once, as the implications landed. Veralink Technologies had been selected as the sole vendor for the federal government's National Healthcare Infrastructure Initiative, a 5-year digital integration program covering 47 hospitals across 6 provinces. The contract value was confirmed at $430 million. The selection committee had cited Veralink's existing track record, the proprietary architecture of their system, and the results achieved in Ontario as determining factors. The stock moved 18% in the first hour of trading. Cecile was in a meeting when Wendell put a note on the table in front of her. She glanced at it, nodded once, and continued the meeting. In the offices of Harcastle Capital, on the 38th floor of a tower on Bay Street, Gordon was reading the same bulletin on his phone when his assistant knocked and told him that their primary lending partner was requesting an urgent call. He knew what the call was about before he picked up. He had known for several months that it was coming. He had been waiting for a development that would give him something to offer, a reason for the lending partner to hold their position while the firm found its footing again. The Veralink partnership had been that reason. It was not now a reason for anything. The call lasted 40 minutes. When it ended, Gordon sat at his desk for a long time, looking at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. From this height, you could see the lake if the day was clear enough. It was not clear today. Philip Drummond called at noon. "I heard about the federal contract," Philip said. "Congratulations to her. Extraordinary." "Yes," Gordon said. "I assume you reached out? After the gala?" We had a brief exchange. There was a pause on the line. Philip was not a man who required a great deal of context to understand a situation. "How brief," he said. "She referred me to her assistant." Another pause. "And Beverly, how was the gala for Beverly?" "Fine," Gordon said. "Beverly had a good evening." He heard the pause that followed, and he understood what was in it. He didn't say anything else. The story moved, as stories do, through the particular channels of Toronto's financial community. Not publicly. Nobody made a statement, nobody issued a release. But the city was smaller than it looked from the outside, and the people who moved through its financial core talked to each other in the way that people do when they belong to the same rooms and the same clubs and the same annual galas. Information traveled without being sent. What people said was not a single thing, but several things, layered over each other. They said that Beverly Harcastle had made an assumption at the Meridian Gala and that the assumption had not gone well. They said that Gordon had tried to recover the situation and had not managed it. They said that Veralink had been, by more than one account, the most significant business opportunity that Harcastle Capital had positioned themselves to pursue in the past 5 years, and that the positioning had not survived the gala. Nobody said all of this out loud in a single room, but the shape of it was clear. And the shape was damaging in a way that a press release could not have been. Because it lived in the judgment of people whose judgment Gordon needed. A board member of a pension fund that had been a Harcastle Capital client for 12 years mentioned, at lunch with a colleague, that he had heard some things and was reviewing their allocation. The colleague mentioned it to someone else. The pension fund review was confirmed, quietly, 6 weeks later. It was not the end of Harcastle Capital. The firm would continue. Gordon was not without resources or relationships, and he was not without the capacity to rebuild, carefully and over time, what the past year had taken. But the particular window that the Veralink contract would have opened, the one that would have given the lending partners a reason to hold their position and the institutional investors a reason to stay patient, that window was closed, and the closing of it would cost them, in ways that would become clear across the next 18 months, more than the $430 million that had gone to Veralink's federal deal. Cecile heard some version of what was being said, as she heard most things, through Wendell, who had his own channels and who understood which information was worth surfacing and which was not. She listened. She didn't comment. What she was thinking about, in the days after the gala and the announcement, and the stories that moved through the city's financial corridors, was not Gordon Harcastle, or Beverly Harcastle, or the particular calculation that had led a man to seek an apology on behalf of a business interest rather than a principle. She had thought about those things, briefly and without dwelling, but what stayed with her was something smaller. She was thinking about the woman at the entrance. Not Beverly, or rather, not only Beverly, not Beverly as a character in a story about money and consequences. She was thinking about the specific quality of the certainty with which Beverly had looked at her and decided what she was. The particular confidence of it. The way it had required no information, no data, no evidence, just a glance, and a conclusion, and the expectation that the conclusion would hold. She had been 9 years old the first time someone had looked at her that way. She had been 44 at the gala. In the 35 years between those two moments, she had built a company that now held federal contracts, that employed 460 people, that had reduced patient waiting times in the hospitals it served by an average of 17%. She had done all of that, and the look was still the same. She didn't say this to anyone. She wasn't sure it was the kind of thing that could be said to anyone in a way that would land correctly, in a way that would convey not just the fact of it, but the weight of it, the way it accumulated, year after year, moment after moment, in the part of you that you kept very still and very private because you understood that if you showed it to the rooms you needed to operate in, they would use it to explain you in ways that would be reductive and wrong. What she did, 3 months after the gala, was start a fund. The Obi Foundation's first program was called the Bridging Initiative. It offered 3-year funding packages to Black entrepreneurs in Canada's technology sector who were at the seed stage, the exact stage where Cecile had been when Harcastle Capital had not replied to her proposal. The packages included capital, mentorship access, and introductions to procurement channels that most early-stage founders couldn't reach on their own. The fund launched with an initial commitment of $15 million from Cecile's own capital, with a target to bring in matching contributions from institutional partners over the first year. The announcement was made at a press conference at Veralink's headquarters in Scarborough. The building was not far from the 2-bedroom apartment where Cecile had started the company 17 years ago. She had looked up the distance once, out of curiosity. It was 4 blocks. The journalists asked the expected questions about the timing, about the motivation, about whether this was related to the recent federal contract and the renewed attention it had brought to Veralink. Cecile answered her question with the particular patience of someone who has answered many questions and knows which ones are looking for a simple story and which ones are genuinely curious, and has learned to address both without flattening either. When a journalist from a financial outlet asked whether the foundation was in any way a response to experiences Cecile had had personally in the Canadian business community, she was quiet for a moment before she answered. "I started this company," she said, "in a city where I didn't have access to the rooms where decisions were made. I built my way into those rooms because I was persistent, and because I had a product that worked, and because some people, along the way, chose to take me seriously before it was obvious that they should. She paused. The point of this fund is to make it easier for people who are building something real to get taken seriously earlier. That's it. That's the whole thing. She didn't mention the gala. She didn't mention Beverly Harcastle or Gordon Harcastle or the particular sequence of events that had led her, on a Tuesday morning in October, to call Wendell and ask him to remove a name from a pipeline. She didn't tell the story the way it might have been told, with the villain and the comeuppance and the satisfying reversal of fortune. Because that wasn't, in the end, the story she was interested in. The story she was interested in was older than the gala, and larger than any single room. It was the story of a girl from Hamilton who had grown up watching her mother work 2 jobs and still come home and ask about her homework. It was the story of an apartment in Scarborough, where she had written code for 14 hours a day and eaten toast for 3 meals, and believed, against most available evidence, that what she was building was going to matter. It was the story of 35 years of walking into rooms that had not been built with her in mind and finding each time a way to stay. She had stayed, and she intended, for as long as she was building things, to make it a little more possible for the next person to stay too.